on you.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you for this introduction. Nice to meet you. And this night together, we'll just go to explore the Vatican the secrets, the Sistine Chapel, and the highlights of the chapel, the history about Michelangelo, the frescoes, the Pope selection, and much more. The first thing I needed to do is just to share my computer, my screen with you. And to start my presentation, I needed just 5 seconds to share my screen, as you know, with you. Thank you. I can do it. Is it okay for you?
Yes.
Can I do it? Okay? Perfect. Can you record? Is it okay also the recording? Yes, it's red. If you want, I can do it. So, the experience of this night will be in the highlights of the Vatican City, and just the focus will be the Sistine Chapel, Cappella Sistina. The Vatican museums every year had the 6 millions of visitors only to see the frescoes of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. But the chapel outside is a very simple design. It's a very simple project. We have to go together inside to show you the frescoes, the history, the secrets, and the backstage. Every day, today is in this season, the Sistine Chapel is empty. We don't have the tourism, and it's a unique opportunity to visit the chapel in another approach. But we won't come back to the old season. We won't come back to visit with other guests the chapel. But in this time, I had the possibility to study, also preparing this experience for you. Details, curiosities, and much more I can introduce in this presentation this night. And my idea was to go with you in the backstage of the Vatican and to start the presentation with different pictures about the chapel, the itinerary to go there. As first, this is the Vatican border, the Vatican City. When you enter into the Vatican Museum, this is the entrance. This is the Sistine Chapel. So today, by ticket, we can go into the Sistine Chapel as normal visitors. But the chapel originally was not into the museums. The chapel is an independent church between St. Peter's Basilica and the Pope's galleries, the old museums. This is the chapel, these are the Vatican gardens, and this in purple is the Vatican border, the border between the Vatican City, the smallest country in the world, and Italy.
Right. Ugh.
This is chapel.
You know, you've got your head on straight.
I found this three-dimensional video, this three-dimensional picture to show you inside what we can imagine. As a first, this night we go to explore together this area, the frescoes. But all the days the visitors enter through this gate. The Sistine Chapel is 40 meters long, 13 meters wide, 20 meters high. The entrance is this one, but underground we have another level with different rooms. In the old Renaissance time, it was a residence. It was the residence of the cardinals who worked directly for Pope. Now it's the Contemporary Art Museum section. We have a lot of rooms in the way to the Sistine Chapel. Behind the frescoes, entering by this small gate, we have the sacristy, the place where the Pope can change his dress after his first election. The Pope is elected inside Sistine Chapel. This place is closed for the public, but in the interior area, you have the amazing place when the Pope, after his election, can change his dress, his uniform. When a new Pope is elected, in the way to St. Peter, he leaves the Sistine Chapel by this gate. And this gate is a connection between the Sistine Chapel and the royal room with the main frescoes. It's the place where still today the new Pope meets the ambassadors of the Holy See, and it's the way to St. Peter's Basilica. The conclave rules are very important. Sistine Chapel is not only the unique, amazing place where Michelangelo painted his first fresco, but it's also the unique place where the Pope is still today elected by the cardinals. And the conclave is the amazing time where the cardinals come to Rome and they have to elect the new Pope. Imagine that the cardinals have to sit in the Sistine Chapel, we'll talk about it, and they have to enter every day by this gate. During the election, the cardinals are not permitted to use phone, to have any contacts with other people. They can't read a newspaper, they can't watch TV. But they don't sleep inside the Sistine Chapel. They sleep in another area, in a small palace, just not far from the Sistine Chapel. They have to vote every day, and the majority has to vote the new Pope. We'll talk about it. Locking the chapel, the Swiss guards have to check the security of the cardinals and the election. At the end of this talk, I will show you the pictures of the Sistine Chapel during the conclave, and I show you the famous smoke, the chimney. And now we have to talk about the history of the Sistine Chapel. Why do we call this place Cappella Sistina, Sistine Chapel? Because the Pope who commissioned the Sistine Chapel was this one, Sisto, Sistina by Sixtus, Sixtus IV. There's a Pope on the 1477 built Sistine Chapel. And the nephew of the Pope will be Julius II. At the time he was a Cardinal Giuliano della Rovere. He will be the great Pope who wants the Michelangelo to complete the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel. Sixtus IV was a very famous Pope in Rome. If you go to Trastevere, you cross the Sixtus Bridge, Ponte Sisto. He wanted to renovate the aqueduct, the virgin water, which still today provides water to Trevi's Fountain, to the city center. He wanted to invest a lot of money in art, in the beauty, in the design of the new city. And after the Jubilee of the 1475, on the 1477, he commissioned Sistine Chapel. His best nephew will be the next Pope, Julius II, who on the 1508 encouraged Michelangelo to complete the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. In this reconstruction, you can just imagine how the Sistine Chapel was painted before Michelangelo. Michelangelo was born on the 1475, and the Sistine Chapel was built on the 1477. Michelangelo was a very young guy when the chapel was painted, and he was only 2 years old when the chapel was commissioned. It means that before Michelangelo, in the Sistine Chapel, we had a big blue sky on the ceiling, and the frescoes arrived until the windows, just here. In this drawing, you can see with more details what I want to explain. The Sistine Chapel today is not this one. The chapel today is so very full of frescoes, it's so very colorful. But in the ancient time, the chapel was painted until the windows. Why? Because Julius II arrived only on the 1508 inside, but 30 years before, on the 1478, Sixtus IV wanted other artists from Florence. Botticelli, for example, is very famous in Florence. But before to be very popular in Florence, he came to Rome and he worked in the Sistine Chapel with a group of artists to paint the sides of the Sistine Chapel. When we enter here, you can imagine on this side the life of Moses, Old Testament, by this way the life of Jesus. Moses, Old Testament, Jesus, New Testament, both painted by Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Perugino. Only on 18 months, the main frescoes in the Sistine Chapel big walls were completed. Look at the Sistine Chapel today and imagine the wall before the Michelangelo's frescoes. Today, when we enter, we see the big Last Judgment and the ceiling. But before Michelangelo, on the 1481, the main wall of the Sistine Chapel was very different. We had the Nativity of Jesus and the discovery of the body of Moses. Michelangelo damaged completely the main wall to paint the Last Judgment, and we'll talk about it. But don't forget it, along the Sistine Chapel main walls, we have the beautiful frescoes of Botticelli, Ghirlandaio, Perugino. This one is very popular, it's very famous. The handing over of the keys. Jesus is giving to Peter the keys of the church. You are Peter, and above this rock I will build my church. I will give you the keys of the heaven. Jesus is giving to Peter the keys of the church. Peter was the first pope of the Christian community. Pope Francis today is the Pope number 266, range of time of 2000 years. Just to focus this fresco, you can recognize the two architects who designed the Sistine Chapel, Baccio Pontelli and Giovannino de Dolci. And the Perugino, who was the professor of Raphael, left is a self-portrait. He painted the main fresco. This fresco is located on the left side of the Sistine Chapel. Close to it, you have another very famous fresco about the Last Supper. And it's the ceiling with the Michelangelo's frescoes on top with the coat of arms della Rovere. Rovere is oak in English, oak tree. It was the coat of arms of the family della Rovere, and it was the brand of the Pope. When Sixtus IV commissioned the chapel and his nephew Julius II wanted the Michelangelo, all both left the brand of the family on the ceiling, the oak tree. And the Last Supper is very original. It was painted before Leonardo da Vinci in Milan. You can recognize Judas is sitting in the other side of the table. Look at the two-dimensional effect, the details. The cat and the dog. Or for example, Judas with a small devil. The devil is just behind his face. Look at the details, look at the two-dimensional effect. It's amazing. But now let's introduce Michelangelo's experience in the Sistine Chapel. It was the background, it was the area before his arrival in Rome. Michelangelo came to Rome the first time on the 1498, but not in the Sistine Chapel, just to design the amazing Pietà, the marble statue of Virgin Mary in St. Peter's Basilica. He came back to Rome on the 1508 when he was charged by Julius II. to work for him. On the 1508, other two great artists came to Rome. One was a Raphael, and I know you had another lesson with the Raphael history in Rome. The other one was Euclid, really Bramante. Bramante was the main architect who designed, who renovated the St. Peter's Basilica. And is Michelangelo dressing the uniform of Heraclitus, the great philosopher. These three pictures are from the main fresco of Raphael, the School of Athens, in the Pope's apartments in the Vatican Museum. I want to show you the three characters of the great Rome of Julius II on the 1508. Raphael was the main painter of the Pope in his private apartment. Bramante was his main architect in the renovation of St. Peter's Basilica. And Michelangelo was a dreamer of the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo had to complete the ceiling of the chapel. When Raphael painted the fresco with the face of Michelangelo, Michelangelo was 33 years old. In this portrait, Michelangelo is 61 years old. And when he was 61 years old, he had to complete the Sistine Chapel for the second time. He left also as a self-portrait. I will talk about it in the Last Judgment. Who was Michelangelo? Michelangelo was a great artist. He was a painter. He was an architect. He was a sculptor. He was at the beginning of his career a great friend of Julius II. They had a direct relation both. They were friends. Michelangelo was encouraged by him to complete his burial monument with the Moses statue, which originally had to be located in St. Peter's Basilica. But Michelangelo was an independent artist. Michelangelo had a lot of problems with his relation with the Pope, and he stopped his work for Pope. He had to complete originally the statue of the Pope, his burial monument, with the Moses statue. But the Pope died on the 1513, and Michelangelo completed the burial monument on the 1545. 32 years after. 32 years after. Why? Michelangelo had a lot of problems with Julius II and with his family. Michelangelo wanted much money, more money for his career, for his ideas. And the Pope stopped his work for the burial monument. He didn't give any more money for marble. They had a big discussions, and Michelangelo left the city of Rome, and he had to come back to the city only because Julius II offered him a second possibility, a second chance. Michelangelo originally was in Rome to work as a sculptor in the burial monument of the Pope. The work was stopped, was unfinished. But Julius II wanted Michelangelo, you can see, to complete not his monument, but to complete the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. So Michelangelo originally painted the chapel as a second job. He didn't like the paintings. Originally, Michelangelo was a sculptor. He loved the marble. But after the protest, after the misunderstanding with Julius II, he left the city of Rome. He came back only to paint the miracle of art, Cappella Sistina, Sistine Chapel. All the ceiling was an amazing three-dimensional project, which Michelangelo designed only in 4 years of his life. Michelangelo was 33 years old when he entered in the Sistine Chapel, and when he finished the fresco, he was 37. 1,000 square meters of frescoes. What does it mean? Fresco is a color, natural mineral colors on a wet wall. When we'll finish our experience together, I will show you a short video to explain the technique of the fresco. Before to complete the ceiling, Michelangelo left drawings, sketch, drawings, cartoons. When he left his models. And when he left also is a private diary, is the painter at work. And Michelangelo here is just a painting on the ceiling. Michelangelo is a painting on the ceiling and is showing us how hard was its job. He spent 4 years standing up and down on the ceiling. You can just also watch here just only 2 of the different sketches and drawings he left. The original idea of the backstage of the Sistine Chapel, the models, the project, it was changed. And today, when the people enter inside, it's a great emotion because one man alone did everything. It's amazing. The first work for Michelangelo was the ceiling. The second one, the Last Judgment. The ceiling was amazing when Michelangelo painted by himself everything with a big scaffolding. Imagine Michelangelo is telling us an history, the history about the creation, the beginning of the world. And he wanted to focus the history in the main central part of the Sistine Chapel. In different colors, we can stroll on flat the Sistine Chapel frescoes, and we can see all the details about the colors, but simply the subjects. In the main part, you have the history about the Genesis, the beginning of the world. In these arches, you can recognize with different numbers, a different color respect the dark green here. In the arches here, imagine we have the ancestors of Jesus, families of the Old Testament Bible. And the same is here. People from Old Testament, families, ancestors of Lord. Sitting here in the yellow, we had the prophets in the Old Testament of the old tradition. They wrote letters about the arrival of the new prophets. And the same was for the Sibyls, the women, who had to translate, to communicate the arrival of the new prophet of the Lord from the Old Testament to the pagan Roman tradition. Watch it. And this one. The history, the drama is here. The families of the Old Testament here, the prophets sitting on the chairs here, one prophet, one sibyl, one prophet, one sibyl, as a three-dimensional effect. Michelangelo was the first man who invented a 3D idea. Why? He was a sculptor, he was an excellent architect. He wanted to unify this idea in one single model. And he designed the frames. Inside the frames, he wanted to represent the history. Look the corner, the point of view. The corners, the backside, you will see it. In this fresco, we can recognize the image of God separating the light from the darkness. The creation of the sun, the creation of the moon, the creation of the trees, the flowers. And please, it's the image of God in a double perspective. Front and back side. The Pope was not very happy about this idea, but Michelangelo wanted to represent the real effect, the three-dimensional effect. And he wanted to show us the back shoulders, the backstage, the back side in the body of God, to give us the illusion about the perspective. Separation between land and water. And finally, the most famous fresco, the Adam's creation with the fingers. The fingers are very, very popular, still today. Please look this expression. Adam was the first man. God is giving to him the energy, the life, the creativity. But please if you can draw, if you can design around the red and green, you can recognize red and green, the form of a human brain, the mind of God, the brain of God. What does it mean? In the last restoration, cleaning the Sistine Chapel was possible. The red and green forms represent the intelligence. You can see the film. Adam was born Eve, the first woman.
Scusami, ti
Yes.
troppo perché l'ultimo minuto ti sei impallata, non ti abbiamo sentito.
Hai fatto bene a dirmelo, ma non...
If you can just repeat the very 10 seconds, because, and right now also you froze.
Now? Just
okay, now we can hear you. No, from,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Because I have all the connection here, but let me know if you can't hear me very well. I was explaining this image, this one, okay? And I want to explain you that the fingers are not connected, which is the sense. The creativity of God is giving to Adam the life, the energy, the breath. Red and green together to represent the form of a human brain. The man is the evolution of God's mind. The man is the evolution of God's brain. This discovery was demonstrated in the 1994 during the last restoration of the Sistine Chapel. From Adam was born Eve. After the original sin, we have the expulsion from the heaven. The last three histories in the main frescoes of the Sistine Chapel, they represent the sacrifice of Noah, the Ark of Noah with a big flood, and the drunkenness of Noah. I can't describe each fresco because usually we can stay 2 hours only describing each detail. My idea is to show you the highlights and to show you, for example, the fresco during the restoration. You can recognize this dark shade. In Italian language, we call it chiaroscuro. It was a dark color directly designed by Michelangelo to finish his drawing, his final model. And I will explain this chiaroscuro in the final video when I will show you the technique of the fresco. And also you can recognize this idea of Michelangelo to give you the brilliant colors, but also in the same time, the two-dimensional effect. He loved using the dark powder, the black powder, to give you finally the detail of the dark shade. Prophets and sibyls, naked bodies to sit in the different marble frames to give you the illusion of the marble, but everything is painted. And look here, Michelangelo painted from this side, from the main windows. Before Michelangelo, Botticelli and his team painted the main side of the walls. But I have this picture, why? Because on the 1519, Raphael had the Great Commission to complete the Sistine Chapel with the tapestries. They were originally located in the main walls of the Sistine Chapel under the Renaissance frescoes. Today, the tapestries are in the painting gallery, but the last of February, to celebrate 500 years from the death of Raphael, the Vatican Museum for 1 week, moved the tapestries from the painting gallery to the Sistine Chapel. And it's Michelangelo at work, because the ceiling was the first part. But after the ceiling, Michelangelo came back to the Sistine Chapel 24 years after. When he completed the Sistine Chapel, he was 37 years old. But when he came back to finish the Last Judgment, he was 61 years old. And if you remember my first pictures, he covered completely the previous frescoes to design a big blue sky representing the image of Jesus, the Last Judgment. Michelangelo used natural minerals in powder mixed by water, and I will talk about it after. The final work of Michelangelo was amazing. He had to complete by blue color with a big blue sky all the previous frescoes to design the day of the Last Judgment, the image of Jesus, Mary, and all saints, heaven and hell, the saints and the sinners, the final day, the Last Judgment. Jesus, as a judge, has to decide where the people have to go. The good spirits go up into the heaven. The other people, the sinners, go down into the hell. A lot of curiosities about it. It's an original sketch. Originally had another approach. Can you hear me? My connection? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Is it okay? Okay. And Michelangelo had the drawings with another idea because he was the first man who painted the naked bodies in one church. Look this picture and look this one. In this fresco, the original one in the Sistine Chapel, the naked bodies are all covered by scarves. This is the St. Peter's body. Peter, the first pope, is giving to Jesus the keys of the church. Bartholomew, he was skinned alive. St. John the Baptist. Look, this painting. It's a copy of Michelangelo, designed by a Renaissance painter, Marcello Venusti. This copy today is in Naples Museum, and it's the only copy of the Renaissance we have to demonstrate that Michelangelo painted the naked bodies in the Sistine Chapel. But the Pope ordered to the other artists, when Michelangelo died, to cover the naked bodies with the scarves. But Michelangelo originally painted the people without nothing in the Sistine Chapel. He wanted to demonstrate we are naked, we are without nothing in front of Jesus' light in the Last Judgment. But if you see the first fresco and the final model, Michelangelo was just covered by the popes. Look, the face of Catherine, the body of Saint Catherine. She was naked, and after, when the Pope ordered to cover her, she dressed another green dress she didn't have in the first original idea of Michelangelo. Michelangelo left his self-portrait in the Sistine Chapel. He is a Bartholomew. He was skinned alive at the time of executions over the Christians. Michelangelo, as a protest, wanted to leave his self-portrait in the skin of Bartholomew to demonstrate the Pope wanted to kill his spirit, his creativity, his brain. And he left his self-portrait in the skin of Bartholomew, as the Pope wanted to kill his artistical approach. The Michelangelo's frescoes survived for a lot of years, and still today they are a miracle of art. But you can't forgive that the Sistine Chapel is a church. Along the centuries, the candles damaged the colors of the Sistine Chapel. For 20 years, the big restoration had to clean the frescoes and look the proportion between the man and the fresco, and look the difference before and after the restoration. With sponges, just with water, was possible to clean the frescoes from pollution, from smoke. In this cleaning process, unfortunately, also the original chiaroscuro of Michelangelo was cleaned. But it was necessary to protect the frescoes. And today, when the Pope is chosen, and this is the conclave of Pope Benedict 2005, you can imagine the position of the cardinals inside. This is the Last Judgment. And you can recognize that day one, the cardinals have to celebrate Mass. And after entering the chapel, the cardinals place hand on gospel, and they have to stay here in this area. Each elector approach altar with the ballots. They have to vote. They have to be the majority. And what happens? I will send you this. You can imagine they have to stay here. At the end of the election, they have to put the ballots in one urn. And finally, they have to burn everything in a chimney. After the election, after the check of the numbers, they have to destroy, to damage the papers. They can't leave nothing. And what happens? They do it in the chimney, which is located exactly here. I show you now exactly the position. They enter through this way. Imagine they have to leave the chimney here. In the morning, when they enter in the Sistine Chapel, they pray all together, they sing in a big gospel. This is the door which is oriented here in front of the main altar. And it's the room behind the Sistine Chapel. The Swiss guards, the Pope guards, they have to control everything. They have to be ready for the election. They enter inside, they sit on the tables. Each one has a chair, has a Bible, has everything, a pen. And it's the moment before the arrival. They have to pray together. The cardinals are 135 in the last conclave. They come everywhere from different continents in the world. In the time they have to elect the Pope, they all live together in a congregation of Santo Uffizio in an old palace in the Vatican City, and they can't talk with other people. In the morning, they enter through this way, and they go to sit here. The chimney is located here, and along the last right window on the ceiling is possible to watch the smoke. The ballots are just put in the urns. And finally, this is the first one for the electors, the cardinals, they have to elect. The second one is used only for the people who can't travel, they have problems. For example, they can't arrive from the bedroom for something. The third urn has to unify the ballots before they are buried in the chimney. First, second, and third. It means that the first cardinals present in the election, they put the ballots here. The other cardinals, they are sick, they put the ballots here. They are unified in the third one, and after they are burned. They put the papers in the chimney, and the chimney is connected by the last right window directly outside. Today we have a modern chimney system, and we put color addictions tabs with a white or black color. In ancient time, the process was very long and very difficult to respect now. It was used with more or less oxygen. And still today, the Vatican security, the firefighters and the Department of the Fire Security is still today to take care of the chimney during the Pope's election, because they have to connect the chimney with the roof and the top area of the Sistine Chapel. When we don't have the majority, we use the black color. And the black smoke means the Pope is not elected. But when the Pope is elected, the smoke is white. The people wait for the election in St. Peter's Square. And after this election, the new Pope changed his dress in the sacristy of the Sistine Chapel, and he walks to the blessing balcony. The Cardinal Camerlengo is the cardinal who has to complete the election, and is the cardinal who has to introduce the final Pope. Nuncio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papa. I want to introduce you a very good news, a very good moment. We have the Pope, and a new Pope arrives by this balcony, which is connected directly with the royal room and the Sistine Chapel. The other cardinals, left and right, they wait here. And it's a picture, it's about the election of Pope Francis on the 2013, 7 years ago. And this original picture is one of my favorite one because it's nice to see how the smoke and the clouds sometimes are in confusion, but it's nice to see that the election is still today a big moment for all the Christianity. You can't imagine how many people come to St. Peter's Square waiting for the smoke. It's an old tradition still today in use. Now, as a first thank you for the attention, I want to show you now another video. So I stop my first sharing and I want to show you, it's 4 minutes if I'm in time. I want to show you a small video you have directed for you just to show, to describe how one fresco is made still today with the techniques and how Michelangelo wanted to show you the old technique of the fresco. The first part is this one. Imagine you have a brick and they can put also cement, this plaster really, water and powder of marble together mixed on the brick. It's a very hard work because the marble in powder and the plaster is mixed with the water. We have to wait that the water is perfectly dried. But before there's a time, we have only this moment when we have the water to design on top of the cement, on top of the plaster, because the water has to absorb the color. And now I will show you. So the first step is put the plaster on the bricks on the wall. To show you the technique of the cartoon of the drawings, now we are just using the simple pencil and just the very easy image to show you how we can design by our own the fingers, the famous fingers, just to show you how Michelangelo used the paper in the Renaissance to put paper on the fresco. But before to describe it, I want to show you the technique. We are explaining you just very fast time how the drawing was prepared before in the factory and how was possible to cut the model to leave the small just holes. Can you see what is happening? It's the same technique Michelangelo used. Finally, you can put on the wall the cartoon, the model, and look what is happening now. The powder, the red one was the red color of Sinopia, the sketch, the model of the fresco. And artists can leave just the small pots on the surface. And we have to unify by the brush all the different drawings. It means that the artist can prepare in the factory the drawings, the cartoons, the models, the idea. And when he arrives in front of the wall, he can put plaster, water, and finally, he can design directly on the wall. The fresco is a very hard work because the artist has to be able to don't leave too much time. Because if the water is perfectly dried, the colors can't be absorbed by the wall. And with the natural minerals, with the powder of minerals and marbles, just with the water, nothing more, it's possible to produce colors and to paint directly on the wet wall. This technique is very simple. We prepare it just for you, but it's very useful to imagine how the artist did it. Michelangelo spent 4 years of his life to paint 1,000 square meters of frescoes. When the work is completed, can you see the gray color? It's possible to have the contrast, the final contrast. Now it's a very simple color, but when before we talked about chiaroscuro, the black color, the contrast between the surface and the other details, this is the representation. To give you the three-dimensional movement, the light, the darkness, the details, Michelangelo has to use this technique. And at the end of the model, at the end of the work, we can just put more black color directly here to give you the contrast of the hand. Imagine that the visitors have to be present just different meters, 20 meters down. So the effect has to be incredible for dark color and the other surface. And it's the final view. You can recognize how Michelangelo cut before the models and finally he unified the colors here. He used the black powder to give you this impressive contrast. Okay. So I hope to respect the timing and if you enjoyed this introduction. Let me know, Gabriella, how in time?
Martina, perfect timing. It could not be more perfect. Thank you so much for this wonderful, rich presentation in all different aspects, historical, artistic, even in the practice, the way that you explained and you showed how the fresco technique works is really wonderful. Thank you very, very, very much. Let's see if there are some questions. If some people have, you can write it in the chat, or you can just open your microphone and ask the question if you have. This is your chance. We still have 5 minutes. Anyone?
Martina, my name is Mary.
Nice to meet you.
That was just wonderful. In all my art history classes, I haven't had someone put the function of the Sistine Chapel together with the work of Michelangelo and highlighting Raphael and Perugino as well. But my question is, you said in the beginning, did Michelangelo himself come back to repaint this, the Sistine Chapel at some point?
Michelangelo came back to the Sistine Chapel for another time, for another commission, because the first time Michelangelo came to work for the Pope Julius II, 1508, 1512. He left the city of Rome before to work in the Sistine Chapel, but in all the time he had to spend in the Sistine Chapel, he didn't leave the city. He came back to Rome the third time, a long time after, 1531, but he worked for another pope. He worked for the Pope Clement VII and the Paul III in the Sistine Chapel. But he didn't stop the work and he left the city, not just he spent 2 times independently, 4 years the first one and 5 years the second one to finish, and after the Last Judgment.
So in between that time, they actually had to use the Sistine Chapel to
course.
vote for another pope.
Yes, of course, because the chapel is still today a church and it was the private Pope's chapel. It was in use. Michelangelo finished the ceiling. Raphael left the tapestries. Chapel. Michelangelo just had to complete the wall, but the chapel was absolutely in use. And he left the city, he came back.
And there is
Still
such
today,
a
the chapel is in use.
Martina, the connection is again not great. Your voice is a little
No,
broken.
for me, I don't know why, because I have 5 stars here.
So now it's good, but it just comes and goes. It's been good most of the time. So can you tell us a little more? We still have 4 minutes, but a little more of this scandalous part of Michelangelo's painting of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. You already mentioned that then there was there was a return to cover the bodies, but also a little bit the meaning of the naked body in the Renaissance and in Michelangelo's, in particular, Michelangelo's paintings.
Of course, Michelangelo was very independent, but he was a very good artist. He had a great idea. He wanted to communicate. In the day of the Last Judgment, we are just spirits. We don't need to take nothing. We have to show us our spirit, our soul, our experience, our interior approach. We have to be naked, undressed, to receive the light of God. For this, Michelangelo wanted the naked people in one church. In the Renaissance, the beauty of the body was the beauty of the spirit. But the Pope was not very happy about it. And the Pope told Michelangelo was a crazy man because he painted a naked people in one church. So the Pope wanted to cover absolutely the bodies, and the artisan church was Daniele da Volterra. Daniele da Volterra was an original assistant of Michelangelo. He had to cover with the big scarves the bodies of the naked people in the Sistine Chapel. Michelangelo also wanted to leave the memory of this time with a lot of ideas. One was to leave as a self-portrait in the Sistine Chapel. The other one was to leave the worst enemy, Biagio da Cesena, in the face of Minos, the judge of the hell. So the cardinal, the master of ceremonies, Biagio da Cesena, was close to the Pope and said Michelangelo was a terrible artist. The final day of the Sistine Chapel, when the works finished, saw himself in the worst place of the hell, undressed, with a snake eating his private parts. Michelangelo left his enemies in the worst places of the hell, naked with the bad details. His worst enemy, Biagio da Cesena, was Minos, the judge of the hell, with a snake eating his private parts. And he was very strong as a message. Michelangelo wanted to communicate to the people to don't interest about his job, to be independent.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Martina. Again, it's 1 o'clock in Rome. I think it's time for to let you go. There is actually, sorry, because I see the student. Frederick, you have a question, a quick one for our guest speaker?
Yes. So you mentioned that Michelangelo had some creative differences with the Pope, but considering he painted the chapel, how would you describe overall his relationship with the church?
Michelangelo had a great relation with the church. It's a very good question, because Michelangelo believed in the church, not in the church as a rituality. He believed in God. And some people said he was a Protestant guy, but really he was not a Protestant. Simply he wanted to represent the pure connection between the spirits, the people, and God. And the Last Judgment respects the ceiling, is strong, is impressive in his approach, in his emotion. Michelangelo wanted to paint a big blue sky with nothing more. Not more design, not more architectural, three-dimensional effect. Just the people without nothing in front of the light of God. The people said he was a crazy, he was not in respect of the church, but really he wanted to show that we are pure spirits. It's important, the mission of our life, our activities, or ideas, not only the time we go to pray or the celebration. It's important for Michelangelo the connection between the spirit and God. He was a great friend of Vittoria Colonna. He was a friend of Reginald Pole. He was a part of a group of religious people, spirituals they were called. And he had a lot of problems with the Vatican because the people believed he was Protestant, but he was not in Protestant church. He was not independent. He had a great idea, independent from the Pope. He didn't like the connection of the Pope and the power in the church, just it. But he was a very religious man. He had a great spirituality.
Okay, thank you so much, Martina, again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Good night, Martina. Say hi to Rome for us. And thank you for bringing a little bit of Rome to us here, too. Thanks again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Gabriella, to invite me, to introduce me. It was a great time for me to stay with you and to share this time of art and beauty. Grazie, thank you very much. Yes, the agony and the ecstasy is that just is a small, just a picture from the movie, the very famous movie. Yes, thank you very much. I'm reading your messages and I'm writing you. Grazie, Gabriella. Thank you very much for everything. Grazie.
Grazie, Martina, e buonanotte.
A voi, bye bye.
Buonasera a tutti.
Ogni d'oro.
Bye bye. Bye, everyone.
Grazie a voi.
Bye bye.
Ciao.